Poppy Playtime 3. The Prototype's Awakening. Chapter 1. The Descent into Darkness. You had hoped, even prayed, that the nightmare of Playtime Co. was over. After escaping the clutches of Mommy Longlegs and uncovering the terrifying truths behind the factory's twisted experiments, you believed you had found the answers. But you were wrong. In an attempt to reclaim what was lost, the company had continued their experiments in secret, with the underground sectors now long abandoned. The email came in late at night, the subject line cryptic yet compelling. The prototype is awake. And so, against every instinct urging you to stay far away, you returned. A factory once full of laughter and joy was now a decaying monument to nightmares. This time the entrance was different, darker, colder. Your flashlight's beam barely cut through the shadows as you stepped past the rusted gates. But you had no choice. The truth was waiting in Sector X, the mysterious sector you had never heard of before. Only a faint map, scribbled on the back of a torn blueprint, led you to an elevator hidden deep within the factory. Sector X. It was said to be the original testing grounds for the most dangerous experiments, the ones no one was ever meant to see. As you descended deeper into the bowels of Playtime Co., a feeling of dread crept over you. The air grew heavier, and the silence suffocating. You couldn't shake the sensation that something was watching you, but you pressed on. The elevator stopped with a sharp jolt, and the doors creaked open. The sight that greeted you was worse than anything you had ever imagined. Chapter 2. The Forgotten Lab. The place was far from abandoned. Despite the years of neglect above ground, the lab in Sector X was still operational, though barely. Machines hummed in the background, and the screens flickered with old data. The walls, covered in grime and rust, had ancient scrawlings on them, notes about failed experiments and unpredictable results. You explored the room, stepping over shattered glass and discarded files. There were containment chambers lining the walls, each holding toys that had been transformed into nightmarish creatures. Some had extra limbs, others had their faces twisted in grotesque forms. But one chamber, in the farthest corner, drew your attention. It was larger than the others. Inside, you saw what was once the prototype, the first and most dangerous creation to ever leave the factory. It was an amalgamation of parts, a doll's head fused with metallic limbs, and a body that seemed too perfect, too wrong. Its eyes blinked, slowly, then focused on you. For a moment, you thought it was just a malfunction, but then it spoke. You shouldn't have come back. Chapter 3. The Prototype. The Prototype. Experiment 1006. It wasn't a toy. It was never meant to be one. The files you'd found described it as something more, a being that was supposed to adapt, evolve, and learn. But somewhere along the way, the project went wrong. The prototype was too intelligent. It began to develop its own thoughts, its own desires, and eventually it wanted freedom. It wasn't just the prototype that was dangerous. The lab you stood in housed others, failed experiments, each one with its own twisted nature. Some of them began to move, shifting in the dark corners of the room, watching you. You could hear their whispers, their footsteps, faint at first, but growing louder. The prototype turned its head toward the other chambers and then back to you. It smiled, but it wasn't the smile of a toy. It was the smile of something that had learned how to deceive. "I've been waiting for you," it hissed. "They don't know you're here, but I do." Chapter 4. Unraveling the Truth. You frantically searched the room for any clue, any way to escape. There had to be a way out. There always was. but everything you touched seemed to trigger more nightmarish discoveries. The screens flickered again, and you saw a disturbing log. Experiment 1006, reactivated. Subject has gained full autonomy. Dangerous. Immediate termination required. Your mind raced. You didn't need to be told twice. The prototype was alive, and it was hunting you. You sprinted through the hallway, your breath shallow and erratic. Behind you, the prototype's footsteps echoed, growing louder. You turned a corner and nearly collided with a metallic arm, one that reached out from an adjacent lab. Another failed experiment, this one with massive, sharp claws. Its eyes glowed, tracking your every movement. It was no longer just about surviving. It was about escaping the factory alive. You pulled up a map on a nearby terminal, trying to make sense of the layout. You were close to the exit, or at least what used to be the exit. But the path was blocked by a large security door that required a code to open. You could hear the prototype's voice in your head again. You're not going anywhere. Not without me. Chapter 5. A Choice of Fate. In the Darkness.